Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Siskind, and I'm the author of the best books on jazz piano, and that's a completely biased opinion. But I've got Playing Solo Jazz Piano, and I've got Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. There's 3 books in the series. You can get them all together as a discount at jeremysiskind.com. The best place for all things Jeremy Siskind. I love money. Okay, but here I'm giving you something for free, which is 3 different ideas to work with if you're accompanying a singer singing Bossa Nova, okay? Bossa Nova presents, I think, a lot of challenges for us when we're playing without a bass player because it's such a rhythmic music. But it's also such a harmonically rich music. So we can't sacrifice any of the rhythm. We can't sacrifice any of the harmony. We better just play real good. So what can we do if we're accompanying a song like Girl from Ipanema? So the first thing is probably the one that most people would think of, which is, and my pen is not writing on my screen, and that's because the eraser function was turned on. All right, which is left-hand bass, and then right hand comping. Right hand's essentially going to imitate a guitar player. The left hand's going to imitate a bass, and you're going to sound somewhat like a full band playing Bossa Nova. Okay, so just a couple words about what each hand is doing. So Bossa Nova bass is generally, it's very close to a 2-feel in swing jazz. It's mostly going to be on beats 1 and 3. Now, it is common to play the beat 3 of Bossa Nova a bit heavier than beat 1 for, I think, 2 reasons. One is that it stems from some folkloric music where there were 2 bass drums. I used to know the name of the bass drum. Someone put it in the comments for me. And it was a smaller bass drum on beat 1 and then a bigger one on beat 3. And so it's kind of this boom, 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 boom. The second reason is that the bass line is almost always going to be the root and then the 5th on these 2 different beats. And the guitar, which really is, more so than the piano, the primary instrument of Bossa Nova, is tuned in 4th. So guitars are usually going from a higher string to a lower string. And so in imitation of that, typically, doesn't have to be 100% of the time, we move from higher to lower. And I try to play a little heavier. But and then in Bossa Nova, it's very common, you don't have to, but it's very common to put in a skip beat to add in a little bit more accent, a little bit more syncopation. Right. And the Bossa Nova experts that I've talked to have stressed that skip beat, that's not necessarily folkloric, it's not needed, but if you want to put in a little extra zing to it, then you can use them. And then on the right hand, we want to comp in kind of an undulating way. I usually teach this, what I call the simple Bossa Nova rhythm, which is just a 1-bar pattern. You hear João Gilberto using this all the time. If you're not sure where to start, that's a great place. So, if you're thinking of how to notate it, it would be beats 1, 2, and then the and of 3. And what I just did there is a very typical Bossa Nova phrase ending. In the 8th bars of phrases, oftentimes Bossa Nova musicians will hit just beats 1 and 2. To show everybody that the phrase has ended. Now, if you want that right hand to be a little bit more undulating, more complex, I often teach this rhythm, which I've heard called the partito partito, alto rhythm. Da, da. Let me make sure that I'm writing this correctly. Da, 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 da. So let's do it like this. By the way, this is all actually in my Jazz Piano Fundamentals book 1. That's a little bit more complicated, but it sounds really nice, and that simple bossa nova rhythm can get a little bit repetitive after a while. So that partito alto rhythm can be a nice change. And you'll hear a lot of variations, a lot of variants of this rhythm where they're just about doing that rhythm, but maybe something, an eighth note off as you're listening to the great bossa nova recordings. All right, so number 1, left-hand bass, right-hand comping is really you're imitating a band. A second way to do this would be shared hands voicings. And this is something I talk a lot about in my Playing Solo Piano book. But so instead of imitating a band now, you're going to play a long... So my 2 hands are playing together, principally. And you can see why it's called shared hands voicings. Because my left hand now is not just playing the bass, it's playing the bass and 1 more or 2 more notes. And I'm still playing that partito alto rhythm. Okay, so, it's a little bit simpler in the sense that there's not 2 different rhythms happening at the same time, but it's probably more difficult to find these voicings. And then from there, if you choose, you could ornament the bass line. You already heard me doing that a little bit. So, it could be slightly less patterned. It could get too boring for your singer if you're just simply playing this. So you could interrupt some of those. I can now divide my hands into some different ways. I could play just the bass and then the rest of the chord. I could play the chord and then the bass. If I got really inspired, I could comp between the 2 hands. So you have a lot of options once you're able to find those voicings really solidly. The third option probably gives you the most flexibility, but maybe it's the least traditional. And this would be a left-hand shuttle. So that means that the left hand is going to go between bass and chords. And so here you'd use some pedal. Maybe this is like a little bit ECM-y and less, traditional bossa nova. If you don't know what I mean by ECM, ECM is a record label that features lots of straight eighth music that isn't necessarily strongly Latin in style. It's kind of flowy, straight eighth music that sometimes is even related to kind of a new age or a classical kind of a sound. And so this can give it a little bit just more floatiness. And then the right hand could do two different things. We could do a left hand shuttle to a two-handed voicing. Let me show you what that looks like. So like... to play a little bit of a bigger voicing than you might otherwise. And you could even sometimes play fifths down below, which makes it even a little more harmonic. Or bigger chords. So as long as that left hand's moving back and forth between the bass register and then the middle, that's what I would call left hand shuttle. So you could shuttle into a two-handed voicing, or you could shuttle, cover the chords, and then there could be right hand commentary. I wouldn't do too much because Bossa Nova is just such a placid, tranquil style. But if the left hand's covering, here, I'm not getting quite as much of the undulation of the da 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 da. So this might be better for some kind of like a contrasting section. Like I can imagine the bridge of Girl from Ipanema if I'm going through. Now here's the bridge. I'm gonna change. Back to shared hands voicings. Back to a bass line. Just a possibility. All right, you guys, so those are three potential ways to comp if it's just you and a vocalist in a Bossa Nova style. So I hope that helps you, and why don't you comment with something about João Gilberto or Astrid Gilberto in the comments if you've watched this far. And do check out my books. A lot of what I talked about with Bossa Nova is actually in Unit 11, I think, of Jazz Piano Fundamentals, Book 1. So you might dig checking out that book. I'll see you later, everybody.